analysis different depending on this kind of solution that we're building? For example, if we're building a brand new solution, or if we are implementing an off-the-shelf solution like an ERP or CRM, would business analysis be done different? Or do you think business analysis depends more on the needs than on the solution? So independent of the solution design, we should do business analysis as the same. This is one kind of questions that I'm trying to figure out, and for that I have been talking to people all around the globe to see different perspectives of business analysis. My guest today is a GD Edwards expert who works as a business solutions lead, an ambitious and analytical business analyst with more than 15 years of experience in corporate accounting, with a demonstrated ability in utilizing technology to strengthen productivity. In partnership with Paul Holt-Cooper, she hosts the GDE Connection, a podcast dedicated to educate and inspire members of the GD Edwards community. Welcome, Chandra Wobschall.
Yes, thank you, Fabricio. It's great to be here.
Thank you for joining me. It's a pleasure and an honor to have you here. I would like to start, Chandra, by telling a little bit about your story. How did you end up becoming a senior business analyst?
Good story. I actually started by accident, if you will. I definitely did not choose this as my career path. I started as an accountant, graduated from college with my degree in accounting, went into public accounting, did my tax seasons and got my CPA, and then migrated into private industry, doing a corporate accounting basically, and kind of worked my way up the ranks and got a little bit more technical at a company I was working for that was using JD Edwards, and really enjoyed getting to know kind of that back end side of the system. I said it was me stumbling across my inner geek and realizing how much I enjoyed kind of that dark side, the technical aspect of being able to configure things, being able to get to data that I couldn't get through via the application. So maybe using SQL or tools that allowed you to, get to database records. So that's kind of how I got into it. Eventually, I switched into a role as a business analyst. And when actually a recruiter had approached me for a position, and I read the job description and I was like, I don't know anything about half of this stuff. And they were like, that's okay. They really want somebody that's strong in finance, that can talk and understand, already knows the business side. They feel like they can teach the technical side. And I was like, okay, I'll interview. And sure enough, got hired and had a great mentor to really help me with some more of the technical aspects of learning JD Edwards from the back end, getting really into tables and relationships and building SQL statements and doing all sorts of things that I never would have thought I would have done.
Interesting. I have seen business analysts coming from mainly two opposite paths. Like there are people who comes from the business domain, like you, in your case, accounting, and you become an expert in dealing with the system, and at some point you were not just being a user anymore, you were designing those systems that the other users would use. And there are people who come from the technical side, like developers, who at some point became so used to the business, and they became starting doing this middle part role, trying to understand and figure out how things should be. By your perspective, for someone who came to the business domain, what kind of technical skills, or not just technical, soft skills, hard skills, did you have to learn to be able to play the role of a business analyst?
I think from the technical perspective, for me, a big hurdle obstacle was tables and data and relationships and SQL. for me, those were the bigger technical areas that I needed to understand to do my job as a business analyst, to be able to make sure that for whatever I was configuring and turning on in the system, that the data was flowing through to the end correctly, so that the accountants, I always keep them in mind because I was one, are able, that the data is correct. We're reporting accurately. So for me, understanding the data and the relationships, that was, and then the tools to get to it at a deeper level. So for me, that was SQL. Actually, it was DB2 through the AS400, but I used SQL Server to get there. As the SQL Server Management Studio. So for me, that was the biggest learning curve, is how to write complicated queries, not just your easy, give me these five, data pieces out of this table. It was, how do I join this to that? What kind of join should it be? So that was the most challenging aspect for me from a technical perspective.
And that's interesting, because I would say that most part of business analysts I know, they don't know SQL, or even develop these hard structures or queries, unless they came from a technical side. So you were the one who came as a business side and became very technical, which is really interesting. If you could frame what business analysis brings as a value to the business, how would you frame the value of the role of a business analyst, or business analysis as a whole?
Yes, that's a great question. I think we bring a lot of value, quite frankly. We can bridge that gap between the technologists, so more of like our developers or maybe our system admins, and the business, because those groups don't usually speak the same language. One speaking French and the other's not,
Yeah.
whatever, insert whatever language you wish to here. And it goes both ways, that we can talk to the developers and we can talk to the business, right? So it's kind of that two-way street where we're able to bring that value. Not only that, from where I come from, because I'm a specific in an ERP, a specific enterprise resource planning tool, JD Edwards, I can ensure that we're using the functionality in the software to the extent that we should be. I can help prevent a customization. That is one of the things that happens often in JD Edwards, because it is flexible. Our customers will customize it, right? And uh, now, with some of the tools that exist within JD Edwards, I can bring back to the business to say, let's not create that technical debt. Let's think about it in a different format. So, on top of that, I'd say we're really good at helping with process efficiencies. We see things, we might see a lot of times as a business analyst, we get a lot of tickets assigned to us. And we might see the same thing happening 4 or 5 times and be like, maybe there's a way that we could automate or improve this process, or can we reduce this manual step that's out there? So I think driving process efficiencies and standardizations that you won't necessarily know are a problem until you get it from like different aspects of maybe it's different subsidiaries within your business are all experiencing something similar, a similar struggle. So I think those are kind of the big key things where we can, we bring value by bridging that gap between the really more technical folk, our developers, or maybe our system admins, and the business. And then, helping to really maximize that investment in your ERP system or whatever system it is that maybe you're focused on, because you know it well. You know what it can do, what its capabilities are, what its limitations are, or maybe how to build integrations, right? Because so many things now, there isn't one system that just does it all. There's a whole slew of them. So how do we get them all to talk in a way that, works for your business?
You mentioned avoiding customization. I would like you, if possible, that
Yeah.
you define the difference between configuration,
Ah.
customization, and
Mhm.
development.
Ah.
Because I believe you might be a business analyst working into in GD AdWords or whatever kind of off-the-shelf solution that you're working, and you have three different ways of working.
Mhm.
So configuration, customization, development. How would you define those three ones?
Good question. So within the JD Edwards space, I would say a customization requires a developer typically. You're going to need a developer to go into the code and change the code to meet the needs of your business. A configuration change might just be Oracle developed this application, so purchase order entry, for example, and maybe you want to just change what we refer to as a processing option on the application, meaning how it works. So maybe I need this version of the application to route for an approval, but I don't need this version of that application. That's a configuration change. That's how I would view it, as a configuration change versus a customization. I don't need a developer to do a configuration change. I do need one to actually customize the program to do something that it doesn't do out of the box. And I think now today, there's less of the word customization outside of maybe a lot of the I would say in cloud, that concept doesn't exist because you can't customize. You can change configuration for whatever it is that the software offers, but you're not going to get to their code because you don't own that code.
And that's why it's so important for you to understand the solution and what it's possible to do and what kind of
Yes.
configuration you can do.
Yes.
That's the work of a business analyst into this scenario. So they're more working into is the business analyst responsible for configuration, or is that another role?
Typically, I would say in the JD Edwards space, the business analyst is responsible for configuration. So we're responsible for knowing what are the things that we can turn off and on in JD Edwards. And I'm finding that too, as I have started working with some different cloud based applications that might integrate. The business analyst for that application as well is kind of responsible for knowing some of that configuration as well. So I'd say in general, business analysts need to be educated, need to get in there, be curious, and figure out what does this do if I change it? But
Okay.
never do that in production.
Of course. And to do that work, what's the practice that is being of a business? I'm sure you are not just going to the configuring tool and change everything to see what happens. At least, of course, not in production, but there must be a process or a structure. How do you get from the understanding your business needs or your users'
Mhm.
needs and get into what must be configured, or in some cases, as you said, creating some kind of integration or customization or something
Yeah.
like that? What exactly, how this work is being done exactly? Wow.
Yes. So I think many different ways. I'll
Okay,
answer. Yeah.
that's
So
fair.
for me, part of it is having worked at different companies, I've gotten different exposure to how different companies use JD Edwards. And so through that, I'm able to know like if the business comes to me with an issue or a requirement to do something different, I can go back through my experience to say, is this something I've handled somewhere else? Right. So that's one way. Another way, I will tear open the My Oracle support documentation and start reading. I will go in to research and find out if this is, something I could do within JD Edwards through configuration, or is it something that I might have to customize? And I'd say more now than before. I use AI to kind of help me with some of answering some of those questions, right? Hey, can JD Edwards handle this sort of scenario? Now, I will say trust but verify. I don't always trust the answers that it returns to me um, because they're not feeding the code into chat or into whatever, because that would be giving away their trade secrets, right? Oracle's not going to do that. So you're never going to 100% know if it's true. So for me, it's a combination. Yes, I will use AI to maybe ask it some questions, but really if I need to dive deep into it, I'm going to pull open the manual, for lack of a better term, and walk through what I might need to set up and how I might need to set it up. And the other way, word of mouth. Within Oracle, or within, I should say, Quest, which is a community user group for Oracle products, they have a fabulous way for us to be able to connect with other JD Edwards users. So whether it's at conferences, whether it's at what they call special interest group meetings, and those occur virtually where you can just sign in and you can ask questions. They have a forums area where you can ask, hey, has anybody ever done XYZ? Has anyone ever used this module or done this within here? Or that's, to me, extremely valuable. Tapping into the knowledge base of the other users of the software is very much something I do a lot when I run into questions or issues, or want to know how can I solve my business's problem.
Interesting. So we mentioned the documentation analysis and
Yep.
and figuring out from the documentation, and now you have AI to help you on that. So
Yes.
AI is doing a lot of the nice documentation analysis and have this capability of seeing so many stuff more than a human could read so
Yes.
fastly and figure out, checking every time, of course. And the community as a source of possible solutions to solve a problem. I liked it. And you specified a little bit about the solution side of a business, the solution development side of something. So your customer, your business, your user needs something, so you might want to see what are the possible solutions into JD Edwards solution for that. Let's come back a little bit, right?
Sure.
Like 2 weeks before that. Your customer don't know what to do because they're trying to figure out what's the best investment for the organization. There's probably a list of stuff that they want to do. A list of those are just stupid stuff that brings no value, and someone have to prioritize that. What's the business analysis work into this side, not connected to the solution yet, but understanding the needs, what must be changed, and what are the business needs that should be addressed or opportunities?
Yes. I think I'm seeing more BAs get involved into that. I'd call it more of almost a strategic area where we are able to ask a lot of clarifying questions, right? Number one, what is the problem you are trying to solve? I feel like the business will come to you with a problem or an issue, but they don't really tell us what they're trying to solve. They'll come and say, I want XYZ. Well, why do you want...
I want a button in my screen right here, right? Something like that. An additional field here and a button. And when I click this button, I want it to open a report.
Yes,
do that for me.
Why do you want that? What will that solve for you? To ensure that that's really what they need. Maybe they don't really need that button. Maybe we just say, you know what? We can do that for you when you click the OK button behind the scenes. We can generate that report and send it to your email in a PDF format that looks, beautiful the way you want it to, so that you don't have to export it to Excel and manipulate it and, combine it with other data. So
And
I
sometimes
feel
you
like
don't need the system at all. You just have to check with your supervisor if make a phone call, and you don't need any changes in the system. So sometimes it's
right.
just process changes, right?
Yep. Yep. And that's where I think we understand too, where we can look at something and help decide that's not a system problem. That's a people problem or a process problem, right? We can help guide that so that something doesn't get put on a roadmap or put on, in a story that needs to be worked on that really shouldn't be worked on, right? It won't provide any value. We can also help say, hey, this is going to solve or save 20,000 clicks over, a month just by removing this particular field that people have to tab through. We can articulate that and say, okay, it's going to solve or save this much time or this much money, because of course
Mm-hmm.
every CFO wants to hear how we're saving money. Um, so for us, I think that's value that we bring to the table as well.
Nice. And you call that strategic part of business analysis. I agree. I think that's a good way of approaching it. Would you say that is what differentiates a senior BA from a junior BA,
Mhm.
or is more on the knowledge of the system and knowledge of the business domain? What will differentiate a junior BA from a senior BA?
That's a good question. I do think the senior BA has more of that strategic background, if you will, where they're looking at how, what are the things that we can do to modernize, to make it easier, to maybe handle integrations, and save clicks or automate a process, right? Sometimes a junior BA might just, they'll get a ticket assigned to them and they'll solve the problem, but they won't necessarily think about the bigger picture to say, oh, well, if this person's experiencing this, I wonder if this group is also experiencing the same issue. And should we be doing something within the system to help alleviate that?
Perfect.
So
These
it's not
two.
just, I wouldn't say it's just years of service, if you will, right? Most of the time, when you hear a junior and a senior, you think of, well, this person has 5 years, this person has 10 years, they're more senior. So to me, it's not just that, it's about the thought processes that go into more of a senior level role where you are thinking about what are the ways that we can maximize our investment in our system. So, whether that is through reducing customizations or building integrations to automate something that somebody's doing manually right now. Sometimes those are the ones you find out about through just a conversation with somebody in the business, and you're like, you have to do what? Right? That's where that senior level comes in and says, oh no, we can make this much easier for you, versus a junior level person might help them troubleshoot something that occurred as part of that process, but not know that there's more you can do with
Yeah.
automation.
Makes a lot of sense. It's not
Yeah.
just answering the request that you were assigned to, but
Mhm.
understanding the value for business and finding out solutions that were not prescribed and not requested. Sometimes the requests are not the best ones and must be adjusted or negotiated, and you need some seniority to do that.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Chandra, I like it very much this conversation. I believe you represent a very group of people, a very big group of people who are working behind commerce off the shelf solutions, ERP, CRM, JD Editors, and other
Mhm.
competitors in the market who work into the same area. And I know you have a podcast as well for your group. Could you tell us a little bit more about it?
Absolutely. So I co-host a podcast called The JDE Connection. So I co-host that with Paul Hout-Cooper, who's the vice president of JD Edwards product development at Oracle. And we started this as a way to kind of educate and inspire BAs. It started with BAs, but I think we're reaching across the table into some of our developers. We're reaching across the table into what JD Edwards refers to CNCs. I would call them system administrators, but helping to bring all of that together and share knowledge in a way that maybe some people that are younger choose to consume media, right? Podcasts have become very popular way. I know I listen to them, right? And I know people that are much younger choose to consume and learn differently. So not everybody's able to pick up a textbook or a manual and read through it and understand it. Sometimes having a different method for learning is very helpful or complementary that reinforces something you may have read. So we started as that. We're approaching our 100th episode already. I can't believe it. We try to drop on a weekly basis where we do take weeks off for vacations and holidays, etc. But we're pretty much dropping episodes every week. And you can find us on Apple, on Spotify. You can find us by going to the questoraclecommunity.org website. I think it's questoraclecommunity.org/JDE connection.
Okay. I'm gonna leave the link below this video, so if someone wants to check it out, just click the link. I'm also gonna add, if you allow me, your LinkedIn profile here, so people can connect. Is that okay?
Absolutely. Love it. I love having more connections, and I love learning more too about how BAs are doing their jobs outside of JD Edwards. I've listened to several of the IIBA podcasts that Susan Moore has put out, because for me, I think one of the things about being a BA is that I'm curious. I'm always asking why, right? And I want to learn. And so for me, those are ways that I can learn. I can, I don't necessarily have to go back for a formal education, although sometimes that's not a bad thing either. But
Sure.
It's being able to, in quick little snippets here and there, maybe out on a run, maybe, as I'm driving somewhere, I can just have a half hour to learn something new.
That's a great way to end this episode. And for those who are following us, check the other episodes around here. I'm suspicious to tell that podcast is a nice way of learning. Thank you, Chandra, very much for joining me today.
Yes, thank you so much, Fabricio. It's been a pleasure.